Hi, my name is Valerie Varan. I'm a licensed professional counselor, a holistic life coach, a quantum psychology pioneer, and author of the book Living in a Quantum Reality, using quantum physics and psychology to embrace your higher consciousness. With me today is Regina Sinkovicz. And Regina reached out to me from the UK as a therapist, and she is originally from Hungary, a child experiencer. She's seen ghosts and spirits since a young child who even were doing psychokinesis around her. She's been clairsentient, clairvoyant. Although I hear, Regina, that when you moved to the UK, some of the ghost activity stopped. But I think it's beautiful. Regina and I decided to go ahead and record this discussion about this intersection of psychotherapy and quantum physics. So, Regina, thanks so much for joining me. I'm so excited. And why don't you start by telling viewers a little bit more about yourself and why, what led you as a therapist to reach out to me?
Yes, thank you, Valerie, and I really appreciate this opportunity. I think it's really important to talk about this topic and raise awareness, between amongst therapists, because this is very, very relevant for many clients and therapists as well. So I am an integrative psychotherapist, living, working in the UK, and during my practice with clients, I came across many clients who are experiencers, and I found it quite difficult to, I could apply my own experiences during the therapy, but for some situations, it was really difficult to verbalize, to find a language to describe what's going on. So when the client is telling me their own experiences, and I might have had similar experiences, or I might not have that particular experience myself, but even for me, I consider myself to be an experienced experiencer. So, but still, I struggle to find a language to describe my clients' experiences, sometimes even to myself, just to find the words. Which is why I was actually researching, trying to understand more the quantum theory, spirituality and the quantum theory, and came to the conclusion that this should be applied in therapy. And I would like to, of course, know more about it, and hence I reached out to you because you advertised this course, and I found it very relevant, very important. So, and here we are talking about it.
That's so
How
exciting.
it could be
It
applied.
actually gives me chills.
Yes, it is. It is very exciting topic, I think, to talk about. Yes. So, looking this question from the client's perspective, I came to the conclusion that I had to apply different approaches and techniques with different clients. So when you start the therapy with a client, maybe second, third sessions into therapy, you somehow have this idea about the client, where they are at in terms of consciousness and self-awareness.
Yes.
And some of them start telling me straight away, those out of the ordinary experiences. Some people, they just come up with them into the fourth, fifth sessions, because they also try to get an idea about me as a therapist.
Yes. See if they can trust you.
Yeah, how would I respond to those experiences? And so for me as a therapist, I need to be able to provide answers to them, I believe, at least.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's quite difficult when even science cannot provide explanations to certain experiences people have. So conventional psychology, in my opinion, cannot answer all these experiences because it is following the old Newtonian physics, which operates in space-time reality. And many of these experiences are beyond that. And hence, conventional psychology cannot answer these experiences. And the other aspect is that conventional psychology is more or less aiming to deal with the symptoms people experience, rather than going deeper and trying to find even those spiritual and beyond the consensus reality experiences and reasons inside a person or inside a psyche or the consciousness that actually where the answer is.
Yes.
Presenting issues. So,
as I'm hearing you contemplate that, I'm eager to hear, are there certain of the client experiences that are coming up in your thoughts more than others that are really good examples for us to address and kind of go there a little bit?
Yeah, for example, experiences like that are not from this life. So experiences that are permeating through from a previous life or the memory of them. For example, having panic attacks when, and at the same time feeling like being buried alive and not being able to come out. Yeah, and having these panic attacks and with this very strong feeling of being buried alive. Of course, it didn't happen in this lifetime.
Right.
Yet they have this experience and panic attack associated with the experience. So the answer, to figure out where this is coming from.
Yes. And I'd love to even hear a few examples so that we can speak to this variety of experiences that come up, right? And I would also love to hear, as we're giving a few, let's say maybe take 3 or 4 examples, and then with these examples, let's bring up what are the questions that they have for you that you cannot answer because of the conventional psychotherapy lens, and then let's go there.
Yeah, so one question is whether spirituality or the quantum theory, quantum mechanics are able to provide an explanation, provide a language for these experiences. And
so do the clients even ask you that?
Some of them, yes. Some of them.
Wow.
Well, not the quantum, that's my question, but the spiritual part, yes. Because, spirituality, we can jump to spirituality a little bit. Spirituality, well, we can understand many things under this word spirituality, but mainly those beyond the normal experiences, beyond the consensus reality experiences, synchronicities, energy healing, near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, even the transpersonal element of psychotherapy. Many things can go under the spirituality, the word spirituality, because these are those phenomena that cannot be explained by the current science. So can these provide an explanation? Can spirituality, and from my perspective, the quantum mechanics, can they provide an explanation?
So the clients are sharing all these different kinds of experiences, and it sounds like they don't really think in terms of quantum physics. It sounds like they're asking you in terms of spirituality, can you answer these questions? But you're realizing that there's just no vocabulary. It's
Yes,
difficult to have a
exactly.
spiritual explanation, which means it's difficult to even have transpersonal psychology be able to answer it. And therefore we're going to the quantum. So I think I love that you're bringing all this up. Like I said, I think what you're bringing up is um, the number one reason why we need quantum physics, the number one reason why psychotherapy is harming people, because these kinds of clients often will get in front of conventional psychotherapists. And because of the Newtonian materialist paradigm that you're speaking of, they are considered that they're hallucinating, they're having delusions. None of these things can be possible.
And
So,
then they get medicated for it. They are referred to a psychiatry. But psychiatrists, they got medicated, which is causing even more harm.
yes, right. And even worse, I know you and I both, I'm sure, have had clients that walk in who have been hospitalized for psychosis. And
Yeah.
you and I are listening and we're realizing they're actually just experiencers. So, I too, being a spiritual experiencer since birth, and my first huge download in the sixth grade, which kind of ultimately led me to quantum physics, because I too kept having that question. And I too went through all the spiritual literature. I was raised in the Christian faith, but I started with my denomination, went through all of them. And then I continued to all the global religions, searching for answers, as well as searching for answers in quantum physics, even back in the 70s, the 80s, 90s, 2000s. And it was way harder back then because there wasn't internet, and you really had to struggle to piece together the quantum physics and connect the dots by yourself. There were a few books out. Dancing Woolly Masters, I think, was one of them. There were a few that would mention and bring in quantum physics and double slit experiments. But like you said, they weren't helping us connect the dots the way we therapists need the dots connected. So yes, in the 2000s, I would say, especially after 2006, 2010, finally, the internet, sharing of information, more and more people, social media, more and more people, the dots were connected. And I would say, here is a summary in answer to our clients who ask us what can help us explain, to therapists who are experiencers, to therapists who have experiencer clients, and they're saying, what can we use to explain this? Where are the answers? Let me summarize a few things. So first of all, what makes quantum physics different from regular physics is regular classical physics, as you know, but for our viewers' sake, regular classical physics deals with space-time rules and laws. So we're still within normal space-time rules and laws. And that's what conventional psychotherapy is built on, which means anything that doesn't feel it has a cause-effect space-time matter energy connection, if it's not that, they must be hallucinating, right? Consciousness is a emergent phenomenon from the brain. Everything's about electrical signaling and electrochemical responses in the body. So somehow it must be a result of our chemistry, or something wrong with our chemistry, something wrong with our brain processing. So doesn't that make sense where they're coming from? Okay, we've got Newtonian classical physics, psychology became classical minded, they're stuck in local signaling. And when we mean local signaling, let's really say to viewers what we mean, because we're about ready to tell something very different.
Yeah.
So in local signaling, energy, whether it's the energy traveling along a wire of our house, or whether it's the energy traveling through a neuron in our body, it travels It has a oscillation speed, and therefore it has
that goes in waves.
Exactly, it moves in waves and frequencies. And notice that takes time and space to travel. It takes time and space to oscillate. So it's all very measurable. But these experiences, like the first example that you gave, right? If someone comes in having panic attacks and they keep feeling like they've been buried alive, and they're like, that hasn't happened. Where is this coming from? Right. And even if a conventional therapist takes them through, all kinds of deeper explorations of the subconscious, what if it was something in childhood, goes all through that, sometimes they just come up empty. Even in hypnosis, they might come up empty. So now we're left with what next? Like you said, what can we do to explain these things? Now, quantum physics deals with a realm that is not space-time. So it's not about energy. It's not energy traveling. It's not matter. And so it's not local signals that take time to travel and they fade with distance. This is something that's happening beyond lifetimes, between lifetimes. These experiences are happening in, like you said, the only vocabulary we have is like a spiritual realm, because it seems like a higher beings or higher other beings. It's not in a physical realm. These are in another realm, another dimension. And so how would that be possible to communicate across dimensions? Classical physics says all of that is, delusion. So in quantum physics, it's about non-locality. That is a huge concept in quantum physics. And non-locality is, when Einstein was talking about spooky action at a distance, he was like, wait a minute. If something seems simultaneously, no matter the distance across the cosmos even, we call that non-locality. He called that spooky action at a distance. And it was mysterious. And it's like, what? This can't be. But they have shown that in quantum physics, that these things are happening. They can, for example, entangle sibling photons, and they can put them on two opposite sides of the planet. And for viewers, I will be very loose with my language, and I will say, when they tickle the photon in London, then the photon in California laughs at the exact same time.
Yeah.
That shouldn't be possible. So non-locality is a thing. Quantum entanglement is a thing. And I just gave an example of it. Entanglement is a correlation that happens non-locally across distances. Behavior is correlated. That too is not explainable in classical physics. I think I'll stop there on a couple of these quantum. So if we say, but we can come back to them later and through questions, like we might want to talk about superposition or other things in certain examples that we talk about. But right now, these concepts of non-locality and entangled states, it brings open vocabulary, doesn't it? Because as an experiencer, we're going to say non-locality, that's what's happening for me. I seem to be receiving information from another domain in some non-local fashion, or even psychic experiences that happen, right? If someone has a psychic impression of their uncle dying at the exact moment that he died, whether they get that in their waking hour consciousness or their dream state, even when the person is halfway around the world, that can't be explained again. So how are these psychic phenomena possible?
And the multidimensional experiences as well.
Right. So when it's coming from other realms, if someone believes they're channeling,
or when you're just in a deep meditative state, and then when you fall over, you find yourself in completely different realms. At the same time, you are aware, conscious.
Exactly.
Of
And
two-dimensional
actually,
reality as well.
can you elaborate on that one? Give a really clear example so that we'll use
So
some.
it happened to me, that's personal experience, that deep meditative state. So I did just a little background story. So I did a yoga teaching training in India a couple of years ago, and we had one of the yogis teaching the meditation stuff, and he told us that meditation is not something we do. Meditation happens to us. And that's very, very true. It's not, meditation is not when people are sitting down and just close your eyes and trying to relax, deep breathing and stuff like that. That's not meditation, it's relaxation, or we can give it many different names. So meditation for me, and that's personal experience, when there is this fall over, and this is when it happens to us. It's not something we intentionally do or create. It's, yes, you put yourself in this very relaxed, and there is this moment when you fall over, and then you are still conscious because you hear, noises coming in from the street and, things like that. So you are conscious for your three-dimensional reality as well. But when I fell over, it was like merging together with everything that was in the room. Like there was no me, there was no furniture, armchair or couch, everything was just one thing. And I completely dismantled my body into the, particles or whatever, atoms. And then I put it back together and separated myself from the different other objects in the room. And then came back, and 3 hours went by. It felt like such a short time.
Yes.
3 hours went by.
Right? Time contraction. So there's so many elements to that experience. So I thank you for bringing that one up, right? Because on one hand, we're in one state, and then we're in a unity state that all the religions talk about, right? All mystical traditions will talk about the unity state. Most religions and spirituality will talk about we are one. And you are sharing a great example of that. But like you said, that just because all the religions and spiritual traditions say, yes, this is a state we can achieve, it doesn't say, how is it possible? And how is it that I just experienced time contraction?
Yeah, no explanation.
Right? 3 hours go by, and for you, it probably felt like seconds, would you say?
Well, maybe maximum 20 minutes, half an hour.
Yeah, much different than 3 hours. Yeah. So the way I would describe that is that turnover, I like, or that fall over phrase that you're using. It's as if we have entered the quantum realm, isn't it? Where quantum properties, all is one. It's one collective.
Yeah.
It's not separated. The information that comes to one comes to all.
And the superposition as well.
And the superposition as well, right? Because you can experience this reality, but you're experiencing the other reality of all is one at the exact same time. So for viewers, superposition is also a quantum concept from, it's a concept from quantum physics, where they realize that subatomic particles are kind of in all states at once. It's not a particular state. It's like all states at once.
I think, sorry to interrupt, but I think what happened really now as you start explaining that is that because I wasn't anymore the observer once I fell over, I wasn't anymore the observer. I was it.
And I'd love to hear you even elaborate that.
Yeah, so I don't know how to elaborate it further. It's still difficult to put it in words.
So in other words, you were the
I was everything. I was everything that is.
Were you feeling everything all at the same time of everything that is.
No, when I think once you feel you are aware, and that's already observing. So, and as you know, the superposition is like collapsing into a particular experience once it's being observed. So, or a single experience once it's observed. So, but when you are it, when you are the energy, when you are, I don't know the word.
When you are the observed, when you are that which is being observed, does it feel like that? Like
there was no observer in that state of being. There was no observer anymore.
No observer, no observed, just
no
pure consciousness.
Yes.
No thing. And so that's a great way where I'm sure if you and I were having a longer discussion that we weren't recording, we could really jump into so many of those details. And so some of the struggle for today will be just knowing we can't, right? We'll cover as much as we can. But I love how you brought that up. I think it's so vital because we can say that in a quantum realm, there is no thing because there's a concept called the quantum vacuum, for example. The quantum vacuum is essentially where there's only like quantum perturbations there. It's like, it's not a thing. It's not space-time matter. The difficulty, so I'm going to take what's going to seem like a tangent because I think it's needed to help us provide the explanation, right? The difficulty with quantum is this. You have two camps of quantum physicists. You have the camp that says, look, we have quantum mechanics, we have math matrices, we deal with probabilities and probability state amplitudes, and somehow this math is working so well that this is like the most successful theory we've ever had. But they will say you can't apply it to our experiences. You can't apply it to space-time. You can't apply it to reality in that camp because they're going to say, this is just math. Like literally, we have a mathematical matrix and it's like a bunch of probabilities. And so let's say, imagine, so for viewers, I'll say, we're going to borrow the term ocean, we're going to borrow the term wave and field, but it's not electromagnetic waves and fields. It's not a thing. But imagine where we're going to borrow that language and we're going to see an ocean with lots of waves and ripples all over it. What they're trying to tell us and why they hesitate for us to use it is they're going to say, this is just mathematical probabilities. Every time you see a bigger wave, you're really just seeing a place where the probability of a particle being there is higher. So they call it a probability state amplitude. And so on the part where the ocean looks flatter and calmer, that's less likely that a particle will be there. Again, the higher the waves, the more likely. The lower the waves, the least likely. So I can appreciate and understand why they're just trying to be rigid mathematicians. They're not trying to, they don't want to feel irresponsible to start applying that in other places. Now, with that said, you have the other camp of quantum physicists who, especially those who have also had their own spiritual experiences themselves, they're going to say, yes, we can. And like you say, they said that we can borrow these vocabularies because kind of we have no choice. So I think, as a slight other tangent, as we therapists start creating a more quantum psychology as a field and an applied psychotherapy where we're using quantum concepts, I think most of us want to use these responsibly so we can, we can find the language to describe how we are in the camp that says we have to use these concepts and vocabulary because we don't have anything else. And we
but also communicated in a way that it is understandable for the client.
And that's our next challenge, right? Is even further using these in ways to explain to the client. And there's a Stanford materialist scientist named William Tiller. He's passed now, but oh, did I follow him like crazy. He was this amazing, huge reputation in classical material scientists, huge reputation with Stanford. And in his more later years, and then also even in retirement, since he was an experiencer and he was an advanced meditator, he did all kinds of experiments in this category. And he once told us, you know, when you're entering, he gave us permission. He said, when you're entering these new territories that are so fuzzy, like you have to be able to borrow some of this vocabulary because we do need the vocabulary. So let's come back now to where we left off, right? What quantum superposition to these quantum mathematicians only people are these probability, here you have these probability state amplitudes, and they just know that it seems like these subatomic particles are existing in all states at once, and then somehow when they measure, the particle is localized. It picks a very specific location 100% of the time.
Yeah.
That is a mystery. The quantum physicists themselves, whether it's the realist camp or the non-realist camp, they really can't explain that. It's called a measurement problem. So for viewers, just know we're not going to explain it today, how and why it's happening. That is the mystery. What was the question?
You mean what the particular, so what the particle, why the particle is ending up at a particular location when measured? That's the...
Exactly. They're like, why? So in that realist camp, like Wheeler, Archibald Wheeler was one of those original quantum physicists that gave birth to the field of quantum physics. And he said, he felt like it was a co-participatory universe, that somehow human consciousness was co-creating, that there was a role for consciousness in the collapse of the wave function. So let me just take a brief moment for viewers to say, what the heck is this thing called a wave function? So we were talking about those quantum matrix, quantum mechanics, mathematicians, right? They're calculating. They have state probability amplitudes, and they have something called a wave function that basically is a mathematical way of describing the way a wave should travel. I'll call it that. And that's, let's say, even in classical electromagnetics, there's wave functions that start mathematically describing the trajectory, let's say, or how something's going to move. So they're applying that now to this quantum mystery, these wave functions, where they use equations to try to predict. The phrase collapse of the wave function means, wait a minute, that wave function, that math, that superposition of all states at once, that where all of these things are these probability state amplitudes, it was there and now it all disappeared, kind of like in a way your state. It was there and then it disappears and then it's back. Like the state of all of that all at once disappears, and all of a sudden the subatomic particle is in a specific place. So let's just acknowledge that that is a mystery. But again, you're going to have the side that says, this is just math, we can't apply it. But you're going to have the other physicists who say, yes, we can. They will call that an observer effect. Again, they seem to have started calling it that we are co-creating. And these two sides debate one another. This side will criticize the other side and vice versa. we're not engaging in that fight. It is what it is. We'll acknowledge it responsibly. But like you said, experiencers need answers, and we in psychology need answers. So then we can say to ourselves, wow, what if? Since we are all made of photons, since we are all made of subatomic particles, since entanglement has been demonstrated repeatedly and ubiquitously, so they have pretty much found, you have a lot of researchers that will say quantum effects, quantum properties are everywhere. Yeah. And in our biology, we even have, for example, Anirban Bandyopadhyay is a quantum physicist. He's been studying brains because he's been tasked to create an artificial brain. But he decided to study to see if he could find quantum oscillations, right? Something with quantum properties within our biology. Mm-hmm. Now, the reason that that was like so progressive for him to do that was because in the world where they're just studying subatomic particles and not applying it to things, they have to keep it in these very cold environments.
Yeah.
To maintain what they call.
So the idea was that in a warmer, more humid body, it wouldn't work.
Exactly, right? Because they're like, no, in warm, wet environments, that quantum coherence collapses. Yeah. And so the body in biology is too warm and wet to support quantum. However, Anirban was able to demonstrate. Now he chose the microtubules for a reason that I might explain. But he chose microtubules for a reason to study. And within the tubulins of the microtubules of our neurons, he indeed found these quantum oscillations. So what does that do? We at least now know that somehow, again, it's a mystery, but somehow biology supports quantum properties. Okay, wow.
And there are voices as well now which say that depression and Alzheimer, I think it was Alzheimer, the other. So in those cases, there is a breakdown of the quantum function within the neurons, creating those states.
I don't know if we're ready to say that or not. Some might be ready to say that. What I know I do feel comfortable saying is that we are at once classical and at once quantum.
Yeah.
We are holding a superposition of both of those states, realms, dimensions, domains, whatever word we want to use, at the same time. We do know that consciousness is non-local, somehow often entangled, even between lifetimes, even between people across dimensions. So we know that these quantum properties are somehow, we are able to contact them, in this dimension. So a lot of quantum people prefer the word concurrent instead of calling it maybe superposition right now, because superposition has that very specific mathematical definition.
Yeah.
So if we say concurrent states, some of these engineers prefer that. So we can say, wow, concurrently, we are classical with all the classical space, time, energy, matter properties. Some that waves and fields and electromagnetism and those own miraculous properties. I mean, we still don't know a lot about magnetism, for example. And I do know that healers have had their palms measured, and there are huge biomagnetic fields coming from the palms of healers, right? So somehow, like, look at all of these areas that are ripe for our study to, okay, we do know the role of electricity in the body, right? We have all of these different charged particles carrying electricity, and the electrical signaling is what determines our chemical makeup. It seems like the chemical, whether we have chemicals dumped in the synapses, the gaps between neurons, or they are taken up, depends on the electrical signaling. Now, in our classical psychotherapy, we often lose sight of that because we're so busy medicating. What we're doing is we are trying to engage and interfere at the level of the chemistry. But as you're pointing out, what causes the electrical to do that in the first place? So I believe we're going to have to go to this electrical, magnetic, and quantum aspects of our knowledge to get more informed about that. And that's going to take us more deeply into consciousness, right? Because consciousness, I think you and I were wanting to bring up a certain question about self-awareness and consciousness. Like, how do we define these different areas of consciousness? So I think I'll just jump there real quick because
it's important to understand that what we understand under consciousness, or what psychology understands. So for me, my understanding is that consciousness is the subjective experiences we have, all of them, everything, a subjective experience. And awareness is self-awareness, is being aware that we are experiencing, we are having those experiences.
So now,
so now how quantum consciousness differs from consciousness, what we understand under classical consciousness.
Right. So that gives me chills for some reason too. So notice, like you said, when we are self-aware, we are a subjective being. The subjective being is now reflective, right? We're somehow seeing ourself. So we are self-aware. And imagine that consciousness is contained within this body, but imagine that consciousness is also contained at every particle level, every cell, every molecule, every atom, but even every subatomic particle. And we do have some of these physicists now that are agreeing that photons and electrons seem to have some kind of a level of consciousness, which confirms my 6th grade download, because the download I received on contemplating atoms was that everything is conscious and alive in its own way. So at the quantum physicist level, we are having those that are getting there and that are saying that. So imagine that at every subatomic quantum realm that makes up who we are in this body, in this physical body, each having its own level of consciousness. So no wonder some people will say, sometimes they'll call it idealism, because they'll say, well, we're made of consciousness. Others don't feel quite comfortable going that far, but they do take a quantum panpsychism view of things, meaning somehow each is aware and conscious at its own level, even if they don't want to say that we're made of it, because what is it, right? So we are getting to that panpsychism. So imagine now that we are nested dolls within nested dolls within nested dolls of these little conscious beings, and we're made up of that. And like you said, I used to, before I became a therapist at 40, I actually was in the environmental engineering field. And it's fascinating to realize I loved working with the environment in those days because I didn't know any other experiencers and I was trying to find a place to fit in. But anyway, I was like, well, let me kind of work with the environment. But what you really appreciate in the environmental field is there is never a clear boundary between any aspect of any ecosystem. So whether we're talking about, like today, there's a lot of conversation about the microbiome and the effect of the microbiome of the gut and how it affects all of these other things, right? We know how much the environment is affecting us. Electromagnetic fields are affecting us. We are all permeable at these levels, even biological levels. We are permeable, much less at the energetic levels, really having constant energy exchanges. That's what matter really is energy exchanges. And so in this field of like environmental science, we see that there's no clear definition, which is why when we start ruining our environment in one place, other systems collapse because there is interdependence among all of us. So this also brings us back to, I know we're tying in lots of things, and I'm glad to just keep on going because I think all this is important. So
it's a very vast subject to talk about.
It is, right? And so here we have this vast ecosystem where biologically everywhere you look there's interdependence. And
it's like everything is connected with everything.
It's all interconnected, and everything is creating with everything else, by the way, even at this material physical level. And you can't really see a boundary. Just like in my original download, for viewers who don't know, I had learned about atoms that day in 6th grade, and I was at home contemplating these atoms, which were depicted as these little round things in space. And I'm looking and I'm like, well, the space, like, well, what makes that atom know? I wanted to know, how does that atom know that it's part of the chair? And this atom right next to it knows that it's part of me on the chair. And then this download from the universe about that.
Can we look at it in a way that, let's say, there is the universal consciousness, and within that there is, let's say, the planetary consciousness. Within that there is, like, big step down, the individual consciousness. Or
that truly is the way I have come to see everything. That's the way my download called it. And I think from an environmental science and at the quantum physics level, quantum biology, that is where the science is taking us. It is showing that.
And at the same time, these are all interconnected and they are not separate consciousness. But that also means, if this is like that, it also means that it's non-local, as you said. It's non-local.
That's the thing. That's what makes
brain.
Right. That's what differentiates the quantum consciousness, because it's more non-local. You can't limit it, right? No. In space-time, you're limited. At the quantum level, apparently, all of these communications, if we want to call it that, all of the communications are happening all at the same time. So no wonder people borrow the term superposition, or we could at least borrow the term concurrency. But at the quantum level, they're all happening at the same time. There's an entanglement going on. And so some people are borrowing language of holographic universe language. The key phrase about a holograph, so like, for instance, Princess Leia in Star Wars, or on the credit cards, the little holographic mark. Here's the key thing about that. Every part contains the information for the whole. So when they're creating a hologram, no matter how much you want to cut up the image, you can still get the whole image from the part. You cannot take the whole out of the part. And so for experiencers, that term is a huge helpful term. And you do have some quantum-minded physicists who are also integrating, the use of the term holographic universe. And at the other, I know Anirban and a quantum engineer named Doug Matzke, I know they will explain why we maybe shouldn't use the word hologram, because there's a very space-time aspect that is in its definition. But if we, if we just say, wow, but somehow what we do know is then in each part contains the information for the whole. There's something magical about it, right?
So that also means that our physical appearance, so our physical body basically is part of a greater consciousness rather than the consciousness being part of our brain or mind.
And what if it's dynamic and we can say both is true all at the same time concurrently?
Possible.
Right? No wonder so many of the great religions will say we are a drop in the ocean that is God.
Yes.
A quantum way of saying it is, we are a wave in the ocean that is consciousness, that is the quantum consciousness, the non-local, non-physical, non-energy matter realm, where there's a lot of concurrency happening that is a huge mystery. But at the same time, all of that concurrently with this thing we call reality. And our space-time energy matter books don't go away. I think a lot of professors, a lot of fields and disciplines are afraid to go down this rabbit hole because they're afraid of how much of what we know will become obsolete. And of course, if all of a sudden your field becomes obsolete, that's terrifying for people, right? Look at how many people the academic identity is their identity. So I think we just have to remember that it is a mystery, but somehow we have this space-time activity that is classical happening concurrently with quantum. So at the quantum level, you can't be broken up into a part. You're always interconnected as all these various aspects, parts, facets, holons. There's many phrases being used, but we're each a part of the whole. And you can't separate the parts from the whole. The information is within the parts for the whole. So consciousness, you could say, let's say we said, here's divine source, and somehow emanating from divine source is all this quantum non-locality and all of its cool, properties of what entangled and all at once, and this information that we're all tapped into all at once. So somehow we have this quantum layer. And notice in regular space-time physics, they will say energy can't be created or destroyed. It's only transformed from one state to another, if you will. And we could say, we call it transformation in space-time because we're looking at change and how things travel over time. But there is no space and there is no time in the quantum realm. It's beyond all of those properties. Now, that's what was so revolutionary about Einstein, by the way. I think for our viewers, we cannot avoid bringing up relativity. Why was that unbelievably important for us? Because in the Newtonian physics days, space, when they were thinking of all the classical physics and trajectories and how things move and, how things disperse through space, they assumed that space is an absolute and time is an absolute. And then came in Albert Einstein, and all of a sudden he started realizing that it's actually not. That space and time are relative to the observer reference frame.
Yes.
And look at the example that you gave with your meditative experience, right? So you were at one level, there was a classical physical level of you that was aware of the road noise, but the other part of you was not aware of this. The other part of you was submerged in the allness, in the oneness of all. Like you said, you weren't observing something separately. You were, it was all at once, I guess would be a good way to say it, right?
Yeah.
And so, with Einstein and relativity, like, wow, space and time are relative to our observer reference frame. So, wow. So if my consciousness, so if I as an observer, if I am not my body, I am the consciousness, the subjective observer. But if as the observer, I can take my attention and my intention and point it anywhere across any domain, right? That's essentially what happens in divine ecstasy. That's what happens in mystical experiences. We have pointed our attention and intention to a different domain, a different reality, if you call, and we can experience it there. We can tap into that. So
yeah, I tell you another example.
Yeah.
It happened with during a session with a client. So clients came in a very deep depressive state. Okay. Nothing was working. He didn't want to do anything. He just was in this very deep depressive state. And so when I really tune into my client, it's almost like I stop being me and the client stops being client. And there is this deep, again, unexplainable connection. Yes. Where I don't know what happened exactly, but when we were back, me being me and the client being client, it was fine. And there was this verbal exchange in that unexplainable state. There was a verbal exchange because we were talking, but it was like more like, I don't know, like an energetic exchange.
I think that's why the heart math organization is so important. And while that may concurrently be quantum and classical, from a classical standpoint, entrainment, right? So for viewers where that is a new word, imagine that your energy and attention at the quantum non-local level zoomed into their consciousness, right? But at the same time, concurrently, your body has your energy waves and fields and frequencies, and so does theirs. And what we notice is when waves of energy are swimming like dolphins and the peaks and the troughs are in sync, there is an energy exchange, and it's called and they start having a mutual vibratory effect on one another. So not only do they start resonating and they become more coherent like a laser, but entrainment happens and they start entraining one another. But what can happen is a healer like yourself as the psychotherapist, and then your client's state is not coherent. It's like scattered like a flashlight rather than a laser light. So let's say your energy is laser and their energy is scattered, and you have connected at this beautiful energy level and at the quantum level. We don't know how to, we just know concurrently things are going on at the same time.
Yeah, but that's the transpersonal element.
Right? But even at the electromagnetic standpoint, their energies will entrain to yours. So like, for example, look at an everyday phenomenon that women who live with one another will experience, where people will start having their periods at the same time, right? So that's an effect of each person's rhythm starts entraining one another's. But as a healer, if your energy is very coherent and laser-like and your client's is not, their energy will conform to yours. So you will transform them by holding your light steady. That's a spiritual phrase, but it's also light, right? So when you hold your light steady, their light entrains to you and healing can happen. And so I think you just brought up a huge phenomenon of why, like when we think of Carl Rogers, why did Carl Rogers say that there's something about holding unconditional positive regard for a client, right? We will always say you first have to connect with a client. Why? They don't have an explanation for that. But now when we start talking about how energies can be entrained, and a really coherent energy can entrain another, that can provide a scientific explanation of what is happening there in our therapeutic rapport, in our therapeutic relationship, right? And then at the same time, we're entraining them, but you also noticed how you kind of lost your sense of self and connected. When that happens, we can become very psychic. So now that starts bringing in quantum non-locality, because we can do this at a distance. We do not have to be close to our client. If you, as you know, if you think of someone and have an intention for someone, you can psychically connect. And actually, in a moment, I would love for you to give some maybe remote viewing types of examples for the viewers. But remote viewers, they were studied scientifically even by the military, and for years and decades. And so they are given coordinates. I mean, they can even be triple blinded and what have you in these experiments, meaning like people don't even really know what's all going on, and they're trying to do that, blind them so that they can't influence the experiment because observer effects. And so they're just giving certain latitude and longitudes and asked to zoom in, and they start writing down the qualities, those qualia, the subjective impressions that we're receiving of colors and smells and sights and shapes, and they're recording these things. And it's amazing how some of these people were so accurate, being able to describe the inside of military installations or equipment or things that they had no knowledge of, and maybe nobody even knew about except for the actual designer of that piece of military equipment, if you will. So this is mysterious, right? It's it's psychic, it's intuitive, a specific protocol. It's called remote viewing. We call it clairvoyance. But again, these have quantum non-locality properties because when they study them, the way experiments can tell the difference between something happening at the electromagnetic level or a quantum level is because they will shield like if they're doing psi experiments, they will shield those people with these Faraday cages so that electromagnetic signals can't get out of this cage. So when the psi connection happens, they know it's got to be something else. So it's got to be something non-local. It's got to be something quantum and informational domain. I'll stop there.
Yeah, so taking this all back to what can we expect from the quantum theory or quantum mechanics?
Well,
what are the prospects in terms of applicability in psychotherapy?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's now become my main mission on the planet to do whatever I can to help us start reaching out to one another as therapists, especially for consciousness researchers. I am starting right now to write a book with the quantum engineer, Doug Matzke. And maybe let me address this in a couple ways. On one hand, so if we just say, what is coming? What is our future? Where are we headed with this? It is good news that at least at some of the largest robust consciousness conferences in the past couple of years, they are concluding that they're going to have to go to more quantum and information models. And because even today, as we speak, most of the models of consciousness are still materialism models. They are still hung in on neurocorrelates. They keep talking about neurocorrelates of conscious. Like you said, it's in that more self-awareness, self-contained kind of consciousness. And they're just stuck there. But because of all of this data that keeps emerging from all these different disciplines, they're finally realizing, and they're saying, we're going to have to go to more quantum models and information models. So with that said, that's good news. There are a couple of models that are jumping out to me today. Doug's is one, which is why I've been in deep conversations with Doug, and I'll elaborate on his model in a moment and why it feels helpful for maybe therapists like us. And there's another one, Federico Fagin. His work, he's a physicist, and he was very much a materialist physicist until he had his own robust, multiple spiritual experiences. And so then it was beautiful because, and he has a book out called Irreducible that for techie, scientifically minded viewers, they might want to buy Federico Fagin's book, Irreducible. But he will explain how he now sees reality.
Yeah.
As he calls them seities.
View on world.
Right? He calls them seities, these I identities, entities, each little conscious beings, and those being the fundamental makeup of the universe. And like you said, he sees these holons. So he sees how they're, they start creating a bigger, more complex collective consciousness as they are building and stemming from the divine, right? Now, Doug's model has a similar model in that, and this is only his most recent, so I'm going to give you the most recent development and then go back to the original and tell why they're important. So Doug now has in his model existons. I love the name. Existons are the name he gives to these elementary, fundamental units of consciousness. And also, he can explain how they create increasingly collective aspects of consciousness. He can therefore, in his model, which I'm going to come back to the basics in a second, he accounts for meaning. He accounts for all of these subjective qualities. But what he really does is there's a lot of math to it because he's coming at it from a quantum engineer standpoint, quantum computing. And again, trying to figure out how to say this concisely. I mean, I know we'll probably have to get ready to close soon, but I know we could talk all day. But imagine that there is Doug, and coming at it from a quantum engineer perspective, quantum computing is working, right? People are using quantum computing, and it's amazingly successful, and technology is exploding. But their language is bit language. They see the tiniest information distinction. Like imagine that, like information, any kind of information. The tiniest distinction between the information that we can imagine would be a bit. So imagine that this is a bit. And then imagine, and he would want me to make sure they're orthogonal and 90 degrees from one another and blah, 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 because there's a technical reason for it. But for our viewers, imagine that this is a bit of information. And now we have another bit, that's a qubit. If we add a third, no, I can't hold them all straight, Doug. But if we have a third and they're orthogonal, meaning distinct universes, really, they're distinct realities. But a third would create a qutrit, which relates to the photon, by the way. And a fourth would be two sets of qubits become entangled bits. So what I'm pointing out is he has a mathematical model. Now we can get to juicy math, not just philosophical. And in this juicy math, he can, at the level of proto-physical, meaning underneath the physical. So imagine for viewers that we can't really say this in space-time, right? We can't, how do we describe quantum in space-time? It's difficult. But imagine that here's classical physics up here, and somehow a deeper reality than that is the Planck scale of Planck mass and Planck times, these tiniest units of space-time. But we also can currently have the classical quantum particles and that realm going on, and go deeper still beyond all of that. So even more primitive, even more underneath, rooting to the rest of that. And they call it protophysics is what a lot of they will call it. So imagine that in the protophysics domain is where these bit distinctions are. And imagine that since we can't use the word wave or frequency because those are space-time languages, but maybe we can kind of say vibration. So we could say, what if at the quantum, deeper than the quantum perturbation, of the quantum vacuum, like deeper than all of that, deeper than 0-point fields, you have these little information distinctions, and they all start adding up to the level of subatomic particles. And like I said, he mathematically can show how if you take 3 of them, if you have the 3 of them, he can kind of show how topologically, structurally, they become the virtual photon that precedes the quantum and then the electromagnetic photon. So mathematically, there's a structural hierarchy that he can create. And because of these 2 sets of qubits that then create entangled, 2 qubits are an E-bit. So now he has entangled bits. And now we enter quantum entanglement. So he can start using this math to explain these phenomena and to offer a model, trying to represent how is space-time emergent, all of that. And where is consciousness? We're having to go into quantum and information language.
I think that would also require people to have a very, very different thinking. Because as you said before, even frequency, you said it's a space-time concept. But even that is a very weird concept for many people thinking in terms of frequency and energy.
Even the word energy, right? And that is maybe, as we're getting ready to close, maybe what we want to just acknowledge is that most of our people are so rooted in physicality, right? They are the fish who doesn't see the water.
Yeah.
Because it's just so part of the reality. The assumption is this physical reality. So even talking to some clients about energy can be difficult. And so let's just put this out there for all therapists, all of us. Let's just acknowledge that we will not bring any of this topic up with most of our clients. Because if most of our clients in medical model, they're using their insurance, they're coming to us for regular depressions and anxieties and what have you, as you said, it takes usually 3 or 4 times for them to trust us to share that they're an experiencer of something non-local phenomenon. And so if they never bring it up, if they, we probably will be realizing that that is a language that's above their head. It's meaning like it just is not in their reality. So we will do our regular psychotherapy that we've been trained to do. However, this is what's different about quantum psychology. Quantum psychology, in my way of looking at it, would include all of our regular training. But now, instead of a cutoff line and anything beyond that is too mysterious and wacko and they're crazy and let's hospitalize them, causing great harm, great harm. We now say, we add the quantum and informational realm to it, where we acknowledge we may not have all the details yet, but if we can at least detail that these mysteries are increasingly being used, but in quantum models and information models, they're increasingly being used to explain these experiences, the therapist doesn't even really have to know much about it. Quite frankly, what would I say to a therapist out there who doesn't want to do all this homework? I would say, don't worry about it. Just do this. Just say to your client, they've now talked about being energy sensitive and being maybe psychic and clairvoyant and seeing dead people and, these things that you don't understand, just don't cause them harm. Say, I'm really hearing you. Please listen to them very deeply. Allow them to explain their experience in detail as much as possible, and ask them, in what way is this affecting you and how do you want to change? Because you can use your classical tools for that also. But feel free to refer them to those of us like, Regina and Valerie and other, transpersonal quantum-minded people for helping those who really want to go deep down that rabbit hole. We can go down that rabbit hole with them. So feel free to refer them to us for the part when you've done what you can in your toolbox. At the same time, we can know that there is increasing quantum and informational models out there that are helping explain these experiences. And we can differentiate from when a client is having a psychotic experience. I mean, by the way, I have had a client that I would say was more than one client that I would say was starting to have schizophrenia. And here's what I would say to our viewers of how to tell the difference. If your client, other than the fact that they're telling you they are communicating with extraterrestrial non-human intelligences in prior cultures, maybe they called those angels, maybe they're experiencing them as some kind of spiritual being, maybe they're experiencing them as their grandmother who recently crossed over. No, there's a whole lot of data out there that help us realize like these data are real. People are having these experiences routinely. Yes. So don't call them psychotic. So if they seem completely normal to you, other than the content of what's coming up, refer them to those of us who can help them. If they can't even track you, right? Like I had this woman bring in this boy, he's probably about 15. And at first glance, it sounded like very high spiritual language coming out of his mouth. Like, what is he prophesying or, whatever? And I'm deeply listening and I'm trying to engage and ask questions. And what I soon realized is he could not. He had lost his ability to track and communicate in the space-time reality. At that point in time, the language I prefer is the brain has acted as a filter of non-local consciousness because we can't usually operate with all of that information in our awareness. So the brain has filtered it to something more manageable, but especially a lot of people who have used substances, it's as if the substances that are creating, let's say, psychedelic experiences, it can break the hardware. It can break the brain and the nervous system processes that are happening, and therefore they lose the bodily physical abilities. And unfortunately, we might have to diagnose that as some form of psychosis. Obviously, let's not be too hasty about it, but we might have to. But if, other than the content, these people are tracking you, they sound like these intelligent, rational people because they are. They're these everyday people. They're scientists, they're engineers, they're teachers, they're reverends. I mean, people have these experiences. And so we just need to realize that the future is coming. And we're trying to borrow some vocabulary. We're trying to build a quantum psychology. But the models are coming, and it just makes more sense for us to be inclusive in all of this. So, Regina, we've talked about so much.
Yes, so just wrapping this conversation up a little bit, what do you anticipate when can we have some sort of vocabulary that can be used in psychotherapy?
I'd say,
on one hand, it feels that it's still far away.
Oh, go ahead. At one point, it seems
it's still far away, although there are really good and we can say maybe fast progresses as well in quantum mechanics, but to be able to put a word to the different experiences, I think that will still take some time.
Well, and I'm hoping that, let's say if Doug and I come out with our book, because this is my goal, that over the series of the next few books, and then therefore some classes or things that can emerge from it, that we can at least give this within the next year or so in a more organized way for therapists to be able to use. So in the meantime, I would just say, if any therapists out there are already interested in quantum and they're just starting to understand some of the basic principles like non-locality, entanglement, superposition, concurrency, observer effects, and then they can look at, what are some of the models that are coming out. And Doug and I are going to be addressing that in our book too. So I would say within the next year or two, good news. I think a lot is going to start happening.
And okay, so on your website, it says that coming soon, the quantum psychology training, it's coming soon. How soon?
Well, and I think when I put that on there, I was trying to work towards this, and then Doug reached out about the book, and I switched my efforts to that. So I think I might have to go update the website there. Maybe I will just say, let's have Doug and I get this book out that's going to be really foundational, and foundational for the course, foundational for therapists, foundational for consciousness researchers. And within this year, let's get this out. And then by next year, I would say a lot of additions to that, whether it's, maybe other books or the training starts. I would ask for our viewers, any therapists out there, to go ahead and reach out to me if you're interested, because if I know there's more than a handful of people interested, I will certainly work to get that out faster. In the meantime, if it only feels like there's less than a handful of people interested, I'll probably work on getting the books out faster.
Yeah, of course.
But we'll work on them all and get them all out there. In the meantime, I do have Living in a Quantum Reality book out there. You can get it on Amazon or where you normally buy your books. And it's a self-help book for experiencers. It's in the first chapter, I gave just a little bit of explanation to these concepts that you and I have talked. I briefly explained about energy and waves and fields and quantum terms like superposition, but also I explained coherence and entrainment and like I said, superposition, entanglement, holographic. I explained these terms. And so in that first chapter, it's really trying to help people understand you really are energy beings and more than that.
Yeah.
And no wonder at your nature, no wonder in your subjective experience, you might be experiencing way more than you ever thought was possible. And let us all embrace that, because that's the process of awakening, which is what all the spiritual traditions are trying to encourage all of us to do, to awaken into our oneness, awaken into
the possibilities we have.
Right? Our possibilities, our quantum potentialities. No wonder people will call the quantum vacuum the quantum field of potentiality, out of which something emerges from nothing. Like, no wonder some of that language is used. But yes, the rest of the book is self-help. There's a lot of things experiencers go through that we have in common that I kept seeing in therapy over and over and over again. So I just went ahead and created those chapters. And so that one's a very easy read. The next ones will be a little bit more meaty for those of us professionally who need it.
Good, very good. Thank
you. And what about you, Regina? I mean, is there anything else you want to leave viewers with about how they can find you, who you're working with, any of that kind of information?
Yes, I am registered with the British Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy, BACP, so I can be found there. There are contact details.
That sounds great. And I will make sure when we post our YouTube video that we have the contact information at the bottom. So thank you so much for this beautiful conversation. And I know we'll talk more soon.
Something we could talk a lot more about.
Exactly.